Welcome back to the pole position. I'm sorry that I've been gone for about a year, but I'm back and I'm going to be making more videos. So, a very interesting week it's been in British politics. We've had the local elections in England, the Scottish Parliament election and the Welsh Senedd election. So, let's get right into it. So, the SNP have returned to power. They've come back with a reduced share of the seats, still not a majority. As we know, they lost the majority back in 2016, and they failed to win it back in 2021. And now it seems they've suffered a bit more of a setback. They've had a net loss of 5 seats, so now they are down to 58 seats. Meanwhile, the Labour Party has also seen a smaller net loss of 4 seats, still very devastating for them because it means that they are going to remain in opposition for yet another 5 years. And the Conservatives saw the biggest drop, losing 19 of their 31 seats. So it's quite a huge loss for the Tories. The party who made the biggest gains was Reform UK, winning 17 seats and tying with the Labour Party. And the Liberal Democrats and the Greens also had a pretty good night. Lib Dems were able to pick up 4 constituencies across Scotland, 2 in the Highlands and 2 in the Centre Belt. But they ended up losing the Shetland Islands, which was quite interesting. They've always been very strong for them, so that was a bit of a surprise. But overall, they increased their seat share by 6 seats. And the Greens also had a pretty decent night. They won 15 seats, up 5, based on the notional results. And they also picked up 2 constituencies, those being Edinburgh Central and Glasgow South Side. One thing I want to point out is that the Tories, although they saw a big collapse in the vote in general, they did actually do pretty well in a lot of their heartland constituencies. They saw quite huge drops across the country, but seemed to hold on quite well to 4 of their 5 constituencies, only losing Eastwood. So that's a pretty decent result on the constituency ballot, but that sort of aligns with trends from the last Westminster election, but a pretty devastating result for them on the regional ballot. So, SNP have been returned to power. The Labour Party made only marginal gains in a few constituencies. They did manage to pick up 1 seat in the Highland and Islands region, but they didn't manage to pick up any other constituencies. And many of their target seats in Glasgow and Lanarkshire actually saw huge decreases in the vote. So, quite a disappointing night for them. And Reform, the first ever Nigel Farage party outfit to win seats in Scotland, they did quite well. They tied with Labour, and they did better than the Labour Party on the regional vote. But what's interesting is that they struggled to pick up a constituency. They did come close with the Banffshire and Buchan Coast, but they weren't able to pull it off. But still, a very good result for Reform. They managed to pick up all across the board in Scotland, including traditional Labour and SNP heartlands in the Centre Belt. But so far they are joint second place with the Labour Party, and certainly they're going to be quite an interesting presence in the Parliament going forward. So I just want to point out a few things about this result and what this means for the SNP. Because although the SNP only lost 5 seats, I don't think that quite shows just how unpopular they actually are. Because in reality, if we look at the regional vote and the constituency vote, I think that the regional vote, which allocates seats proportionately, is probably a better gauge of actual party support, but for argument's sake, we'll look at both. On the constituency vote, the SNP saw a 9.5% drop, going from 47% to 38% of the vote. And on the regional list, that drop was even higher. They went down 13.2% of the vote and went from 40% to 27.2%. So that's quite a huge drop, and I think that shows that there is a lot of dissatisfaction with the SNP. So what I think this is an example of is an example of a fractured opposition. So the opposition in Scotland is split largely five ways. You have the Green Party, the Liberal Democrats, Labour, the Conservatives, and now Reform. So there is a lot of division in Scotland, much like the rest of the UK, and I think that this election probably highlights that more than anything. But certainly the SNP did manage to win the largest number of votes, therefore they were able to pull together a relatively strong electoral coalition, particularly on the constituency ballot. They performed 11 points better on the constituency vote than the regional vote. That probably says a lot more about first past the post as a system, but I guess that's a topic for another video. So we also have the Welsh Senedd results, which were very interesting because the Labour Party have officially seen their first election defeat in Wales since 1918. They went down 25 points in the vote share, only winning 9 out of the 96 seats. So that's quite a huge defeat. In fact, their leader even lost her seat in the election. So that's the first time that a sitting head of government in the UK has ever lost their seat in a general election, as far as I'm aware. And it seems that the big benefactors are Plaid Cymru and Reform. So Plaid Cymru have now formed a minority administration, and Reform are now the main opposition. Reform went up 28% in the vote share, and Plaid went up 14%. Wales is the first part of the UK, or of the devolved nations, to use a regional list only as their the decider of seats. So they've introduced a much more proportionate system that sort of has a somewhat similar principle to the Northern Irish system, but it's not transferable, which is sort of the primary difference. There's only one vote. But it is quite interesting to see how this result has panned out. It seems that Plaid are largely dominating Labour heartlands in the south of Wales, and Reform are dominating in the north. So there's probably a lot of differences there in terms of voter patterns that I think would be very interesting to dive in further. But yeah, this is a pretty devastating result for the Labour Party after they previously dominated the UK elections in Wales. I think they won all but 5 of the Welsh seats. So going from there to now, it's quite a steep drop. So what I'm very curious to see how this sort of affects the Labour Party and affects their strategy, and whether or not they sort of rethink their the way they go about attempting to win seats in Wales. So I'd be curious to see how they campaign in Wales going forward, and whether or not Plaid Cymru can end up holding power and turning a 5-year term into a 10-year term at the next election. Finally, there's the local elections in England, which ran pretty much as people would expect. The Labour Party saw huge losses, went down in the vote share, although Reform's vote share compared to the last local elections also dropped considerably. It seems that the Green Party have seen some pretty decent gains as well, though nothing compared to Reform, who won around nearly 1,500 seats, or 1,500 additional council seats. And the Liberal Democrats also made gains, but the Conservatives and the Labour Party both saw significant losses. And this is quite huge, because this seems to have led to a challenge against the premiership of Keir Starmer. So there seems to have been a rather strange rebellion within the Labour Party, where MPs have rebelled, but there isn't really much of an agreement on who will replace Starmer. So Wes Streeting seems to be trying to put his name forward, but also hesitating, presumably because he doesn't want to be seen as the first one to fire the shot, and also presumably because he is struggling to get support within the parliamentary party. And it seems that a Labour MP for Makerfield, Josh Simmons, has stood down in an attempt to allow Andy Burnham to run in his constituency at the upcoming by-election. Now, it seems that the NEC are going along with this, the Labour National Executive Committee, who decide who gets to be a candidate. And most likely Burnham would have significant support from the parliamentary party. Whether or not he'll win the leadership election remains to be seen. He probably stands quite a good chance to win. But it seems that the sort of supposed soft left side of the party, the Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband faction, is trying to get him in charge, which means they are attempting to delay any leadership election until he is able to run. What that means for the Labour Party's future prospects, I'm really not sure. I'd be curious to find out, and I'll also be curious to find out if what your thoughts are on this. I think that I'm not going to give my opinion on this. Obviously, I guess that's a matter for MPs and Labour members, and I think that it's definitely going to be quite curious. And this is really the first time that I can think of, except possibly Harold Wilson, where a Labour leader in government has been ousted in this style. It does remind me, and I think a lot of people, of the time where Boris Johnson was kicked out of office. And I would be curious to see how they go about, carrying this through, or seeing it through, and whether or not Starmer's endorsement of Burnham as a candidate in Makerfield is sort of a capitulation, and possibly he's waiting to resign at a later date. But that's just speculation, and I don't really want to speculate too much because obviously we don't know. But I would be very curious, to see where this goes from here, who the Labour membership would end up picking as Prime Minister. And I think that it's certainly quite an unprecedented turn of events for the Labour Party, considering their history, and considering the way that politics has sort of been shifting over the last few years. But yeah, do let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if there's any part of this you want me to cover more. Thank you for watching, of course. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I will attempt to do more of a detailed breakdown of the results over the coming weeks. So as always, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.